I want to talk about polygroups in Zbrush. Polygrouping is a way to have your model be designated with different color groups, and we can use those color groups to divide and group and combine the model in different ways. It's kind of like using a group function in a 3D modeling software like Maya, where you want to group things together. The easiest way to create a polygroup is through a mask. What you can do is paint a mask on your model. So here I'm painting in the shirt and the head. Then what I can do is hit Shift F. That goes into the frame view, your framing. And then I can hit Control W and it will convert the mask into a polygroup. So again, I can just go ahead and this time I will use a lasso to select my mask. So I have my mask selected and hit Control W. Control W is the shortcut to turn a mask into a polygroup. And I will do it for the boots. And this belt. So this time I'm going to paint on the model to mask out the belt. And then if I want to turn off symmetry and get just one side of something, like this pocket, I can do that. Or maybe this little bag or whatever that he's wearing around there. You can get that too. And that's the process of creating poly groups using masks. So Shift F is the keyboard shortcut for framing. And you can see right here when I hit Shift F and I'm on a particular subtool, that subtool shows me colors that have been applied to it. So these aren't colors that are applied to the model as a texture. This is ZBrush's way for you to group and select things on the model itself by applying colors. So you can see here this this part on the model has a green and a blue. Now if I go through this model and alt click on different parts, you can see as I'm alt clicking, because I have this line polyfill frame function turned on, again it's Shift F and I can toggle it by hitting Shift F. As I alt click, that's basically selecting the subtool and showing me the color grouping that's been applied to that particular part because the poly frame framing is turned on. And in the interface, if you have the standard interface, polyframing is this icon down here. It looks like a grid. Basically the way it works is if you turn off line, there's a little, you just click on the word line, the wireframes go away, so you just see the color and you don't see the wireframes. So that can be helpful to make things clearer so you can see that polygrouping a lot easier. So now when I click, I don't have the actual wireframe. And again, if you go into the icon, you just click on the word line, and you click on that word and it turns it off. So polygrouping is great because what I can do is I can take this model and I can merge everything together. So I'm going to go into the merge menu in subtools and click on merge visible. Actually, I'm going to just click on merge down. I'm going to turn off always OK and hit OK, and then I'm going to keep on merging down. And as I merge down, you'll begin to see, since everything is being combined onto one subtool, I get to see the polygroups for everything all at once. So here's my polygrouping for the whole model. If I hit Shift F again, I just see the model without the polygrouping. And what's nice about this now is I can split up my model based on the polygroup colors. And I can also hide and show different parts of the model by using Shift Control. So if I turn on Shift Control, just hold the Shift Control keys and click on different parts of the model, it lets me hide and select that part of the model based on the poly painting. If I hit Shift Control outside and click outside of the model, it shows me everything. Now when I combined this model together, several parts had polygrouping on that model. So what you want to do sometimes is maybe fix the polygrouping or modify it in some way. So for example, on this leg here, I have this one kind of bone extension. It has two colors. It has a blue and a purple, and maybe I just want it to have one polygrouping color. So I'm going to use Shift and Control to hide, and if you double click, it's basically going to invert that selection. And I'm just trying to isolate this bone by itself. So you see I have several small pieces here, individual polygons that have the polygrouping applied. So I want to fix that so I don't have these groups all by themselves. So the first thing I want to do is isolate this bone piece. So I'm just clicking on every other piece besides the bone. And then what I can do is I can mask this piece here, this long thing, looks like a bone with a bulge in the middle. I'm going to mask it out by using a lasso. So I'm control clicking to get my masking capabilities, and then I have stroke selected out of the stroke menu, and I have lasso selected from that menu. And now I'm going to just drag around that bone piece, and then once I have it fully selected, I can hit Control W, and then what that's going to do is take those two colors and make them two polygroup colors and make them one color, just like that. And I'll do the same thing for these other parts here. So I have some, like, it looks like this upper part here has an orange and a purple. So again, I'm going to control Shift on everything but that part. That's hiding everything that's around it. I'm going to again control and drag around it so only that part is selected. And then I'm going to hit Control W, and now those two polygroups are now one polygroup color. Now what I'm going to do is split this apart. So since I have the polygroups, I can go in the subtool and click on split and say group split. What group split is going to do is create a separate subtool for each different polygroup. So I'm going to click on group split, hit OK, and you look at my subtool menu now. Now everything that was a different polygroup has been separated. So this is the main reason to really use polygroups. It helps you to isolate parts of your model, and if you can isolate different parts, you can sculpt on them separately, split them, merge them back. The other great thing about it is if I need to export to another application, let's say Maya, I can export individual pieces as OBJ files after I split them, and then I can import them back into Zbrush if I want to, knowing that everything's been separated because I use some sort of polygrouping strategy to divide that model up. If you have a whole model that's all one polygroup, it's hard to work on. But if you can split it up into polygroups, it makes it a lot easier. So back here, I have all these separate pieces because I properly polygroup them. So if I want to create that other side again, I can just alt-click on different pieces, go into subtools, hit duplicate. So I duplicated this upper orange arm here, and then I can go into deformation and hit mirror, and I'm on the x-axis, and I can do this part by part. So under deformations, there's a mirror setting. I just make sure X is selected, and then I can go through and recreate parts of my model because they have those polygroups available to me, which have been used to create the subtools with the split command. So essentially I'm rebuilding the one side, only because the polygrouping on that other side was kind of messed up. So this is letting me get all of my polygroups back. And then if you want to create more polygroups, go ahead and do that. A lot of times, instead of using lasso, I'm just using my standard masking, turning on back symmetry, and then I'm just painting on the model, painting a mask with the control key down, then hitting control W, and I got my separate polygroup. So polygroups are going to come in handy for all sorts of different operations, such as panel looping, extractions. If I have a polygroup set, and let's say I am using my gizmo or one of my transpose brushes, if I can control click on that polygroup, what it does is it masks out the other part that it has that was not clicked on, so I can go ahead and modify things based on how things are polygrouped. So that's another great reason to polygroup things. If I want to bring back just one color, again, I just hit Control W. So I had two polygroups before. I hit Control W, and now I'm back to one polygroup. There's a polygroup menu here in Zbrush that will give you some additional capabilities. So you click on that. Auto groups is nice. It will take things that are separate pieces where the polygons aren't merged together. So for example, I'm going to go here and, well, here's a good example. I have these two spheres. They're like eyes um, on this creature here. So these two spheres, they're purple. If I click on auto groups, and I think I should have symmetry turned off, in the polygroup menu, that will give me separate polygroups because they're two separate pieces. So there's all sorts of different functions to get different types of polygrouping. For example, if I click on group front, it will apply a polygroup to the front of the model and not to the back of the model. It's based on where the camera is facing. Here you can get groups from the masking. That's what we've been doing with Control W. Or you can paint on the model using poly painting and get groups from that as well. So all sorts of different ways to use polygrouping. It really comes in handy. I would use it constantly just to separate and divide parts of the model. Use the polygrouping for masking. Use it to create subtools with split from groups. Use it as a means to allow you to divide something up later on after you've merged all the subtools together. It's one of those indispensable ways that sculptors help to group parts and pieces of the model. So polygrouping is something that's important. Shift F to see it. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments and I can answer them for you.